Hi, good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I'm Brawn, and this is our second edition of Talk Derby to Me. And who are we joined by today?
I'm Wicked Lizard. I'm a referee with Humboldt Roller Derby.
I'm Roarshock Tess, and I'm a skater with Humboldt Roller Derby.
Great. So we are making this video series to share with our fans a little bit more about what to look for when you're watching roller derby, explain some of the official calls, and talk about a little bit of the strategy that you'll see in the game. We know that fans always want to know more about the game, especially fans who are new to the sport. And so in our time of social distancing, we're using this as an opportunity to share our sport with you. So we're going to watch a little bit more footage from the game from February 22nd. This was our most recent game. And this is the footage we watched in our first Talk Derby to Me video, but we're going to watch some different jams. So this is the second half of our Redwood Rollers versus V-Town game. And I will go ahead and share my screen with you and we'll get started. Okay. So right off the bat, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Right off the bat, I see an official right here standing with their hands up like this. Could you tell us what that means?
So that official is in a position called the jam timer. And what they're doing is holding up an O, which stands for official review. And that means that one of the teams requested a review of a call. So either they want something learned or they're asking for a penalty to be assessed. And the jam timer is signifying that the official review is still in process. So we're just waiting for that to end.
Okay. Let's see. I think we were previously talking about who can call an official review. Could you explain a little more about that?
Yeah, so each team has one official review that they can use each half. So the people there are certain people who are allowed to call it. It's the team captain and the team alternate. So those have to be designated at the beginning of the game. They're the only ones who can request it. And they request it by holding up an O so that the officials can see, and then the officials will blow a whistle to signify that they saw that. There's also situations where officials can call a timeout to review a call amongst themselves. If that happens, you'll see the jam timer there on the left. Instead of holding up an O, they'll be doing this signal out on the track. And that means there's an official timeout that was not called by the team.
I never knew that the A stands for alternate. So I always wondered. Thank you for clarifying that. I knew the A could participate in that. Maybe I thought it stood for awesome.
Well, it could be either one. Technically, for the rules, it's alternate, but
learn new things every day.
Yes, but that's a good point. So if you're watching the game and you see that some of the skaters have a C or an A on their arm, that's why. That means that those are the designated team captain and team alternate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, let's watch this jam.
So we just saw the referee do this, and that means the official review is over.
Yep. And now you'll see that jam timer holding up a 5. That means there was 5 seconds left, and when they put that down and blow a single whistle, that started the jam.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the black jammer just got through and got lead.
Okay. And can you remind us how that's signified?
Yes, so you can only barely see it on the edge of the screen, but the lead jammer is earned when they're the first jammer that legally earns passes on all of the blockers and gets through the pack. And you'll know that that's happened when the referee who's following them, the jammer referee, blows 2 whistles, and they hold up an L with one hand and they point at the skater with the other hand. So if you see a referee like this, that means that that's the lead jammer.
Okay. And you're here in the screen. And what role are you playing in this game?
I am one of the jammer referees in this game, and I am, I believe, assigned to the red jammer. So there was the black the jammer referee who was assigned to the black jammer was the one who called lead. The red jammer you can see on the far side of the screen on the outside is the one that I'm following. So I'm trying to see through this pack and always be staying even with the jammer to see when they've gotten through and who they've passed.
Okay.
I wanted to also mention that the jammers are not scoring points yet. So they have not made they have to make their initial pass, that first pass through the pack, before they can start scoring points. So now that the jammer in black is out of the pack, they're coming around, and this is the pass where they start scoring those points.
Okay, and then the red jammer hasn't gotten through the pack yet, so they're still not scoring points either.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Correct, yes. Both jammers have to complete an initial pass and get through the pack fully before they can start scoring points.
And I see on the left-hand side of the screen here that there's a skater wearing a red jersey, pushing their chest up against a skater wearing a black jersey. What might be going on there?
I'm wondering if that skater in red is trying to play a little offense for their jammer, because I believe the jammer, that red helmet right there, I think that's the jammer. They're close to escaping the pack, and I think that blocker in black in the front is a threat to them, and that red blocker sees that, and they're trying to help out their jammer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
An interesting thing people might wonder about looking at that as well. As you mentioned, Brawn, the red blocker you can see is pushing with their chest, but they've also got their arm out in front of that black blocker across their back. I think you talked a little bit in the last video that you can't block somebody with your forearm, and that means anything from the elbow to the hand. Mm-hmm. In this case, this is one of the subtleties of when you're a referee and looking for penalties. It doesn't look like the forearm is actually physically stopping them. It's probably just kind of reached out for balance or something. But that's something that the referees would be looking at is where is the contact happening? If it's with their chest, that's legal. If they started holding that skater back with their arm, then that would become a penalty.
Okay, cool. All right, let's keep watching.
Okay.
Uh-oh, I paused it a little too slowly. I was trying to show the scoreboard.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
We have, so it's not possible to show while it's paused, but this jammer was not lead jammer for the red team, and this jammer is the lead jammer, so their name is blinking on the scoreboard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. If you see that blinking, that means that that's the lead.
So
Tess, do you want to tell us about the other two things that are down here?
Yeah, so we have the period timer, which is the time that has elapsed in the first half or the first period of the game. So there's two 30-minute periods in a game. And the jam timer, that it says jam right there, that's how long, that's how much time is left in the jam. And so I misspoke actually, because it's not how much time has elapsed, it's counting down. And so it looks like there's 1:35 left in the jam, and 18 minutes and 17 seconds left in the period.
Okay.
While we're looking at the scoreboard, a couple of other things people might be curious about if they're looking really closely. One is you can see the scores up above. So the big numbers are the total points that each team has scored. But in between those, there are two numbers. They're zeros right now. But if you notice those during a game, those are the jam totals. So as the jammers are scoring points, you might see a referee hold up a 4, and then a 4 will show up there, and then it'll go up to 8 or 12 or whatever. So those numbers in between are just a running total for the current jam or the jam that just ended.
Okay.
And also there are some dots on the outside edges of the score. And those signify how many timeouts and official reviews the teams have used. So if there's a dot there, it means they haven't used it, but you can see on the right-hand side, there's a little square that's empty. that means that that team has used up their official review for that half because the dot is gone.
Great. Super helpful. Thank you.
So it looks like blockers in black are momentarily trying to help their jammer, and then they're immediately going back to defense in the front as the red jammer comes up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something that people, if they're new to Derby, may not realize is that the blockers are playing both offense and defense at the same time. So it's not like football where you've got your defensive lineup and your offensive lineup and they're only out at one time. They're switching back and forth to, between offense and defense constantly, as Tess mentioned.
Yeah. Totally. I backed it up a little. I backed that jam up just so we could see the jammer trying to call it off and talk a little bit about some of that. So I'm just going to play that same few seconds again. The black jammer is who I'm looking at right now.
Okay.
So it looked to me that like the black jammer started, they tapped their hips once for sure. It's hard to tell if they tapped it a second time. So the rules are the lead jammer is the one who has the power to call off a jam early before the 2 minutes is up. And but they have to tap their hips multiple times. So just once is not enough. The referee, the jammer referee, who will call it off when they ask for it by blowing 4 whistles, has to see 2 taps. So it looks like they started to think about calling it off. Either they stopped or the jammer referee couldn't see them because they were on the outside, and then they went back in, and then they did the 2 taps to call it off after that, it looks like.
Okay, so that seems like a hard part of being an official. You have to see them do it twice, right?
It is. It's really hard, and it's easy to anticipate too when you see people doing like this. We have to wait until that second time that the hands actually touch the hips. But the officials work as a team also. So when you have a situation like that, if a jammer is on the outside and there's a whole bunch of blockers in the middle and the jammer referee is having a hard time seeing them, the outside referees will, if they see that the lead jammer is tapping their hips and trying to call it off, they'll usually do some sort of a little tap to their helmet, just as an informal communication to let the jammer referee know that they see that jammer is trying to call it off.
So I see some reactions going on here as it's paused. I know that the red jammer, who is a really fast skater, just got through, and everyone's going, ah! So it seems like there could be some heightened emotions on the track. And as an official, what are some of the things you might want to say about that?
Oh, about emotions on the track. It's an intense game, and so the officials and the rules acknowledge that. And there are certain rules, though, when it comes to like verbal outbursts, for example. Obscenities are not permitted. There is some discretion there in the rules. So if a skater gets hit down really hard and hurt, or something happens and they just mutter something under their breath and it's really quiet, it's understood that that's just part of the game and the emotions run high, and that would not be something that we would call a penalty for. But if there are 2 situations where it could be a penalty if somebody is yelling something inappropriate. One is if they yell something really loud where the audience could hear it, because it's just not considered good sporting behavior, and we try to keep this a family-friendly sport. So that would be a misconduct penalty if somebody yells certain words that I won't say here. The other situation is if somebody yells something doesn't necessarily have to be an obscenity, but Something that's clearly disrespectful towards another skater that's unsporting. There is a penalty called unsporting conduct, which falls under misconduct. You would see this same hand signal. And that could be called if somebody yelled something offensive or degrading at another player. That's unacceptable as well. So the skaters are expected to hold to a certain standard of sportsmanship.
Or if they yell at a ref, right?
Or if they yell at a ref, yeah, actually, so I didn't even go there. The same thing applies if they yell at a ref. So
Okay.
again, if they seem to be just yelling quietly in frustration, it's just an involuntary outburst and it's not directed at a disrespectful way, then we would let that go. But yeah, if they yell at a ref directly, something rude about a call, that's also not permitted.
Okay. Are we ready to play?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I am slightly confused because I thought I saw the jammer attempting to call off is that what, I thought I saw it twice. Like they tried to put their hands on their hips once, but then didn't do it again. But then it looked like she did it twice. Did I mistakenly see that, or was that?
I thought so too, but then I also noticed where we were paused that the jammer referee still had her hand out pointing at the jammer.
Okay.
Whereas if they had done the call off, they would have been tapping their hips to echo that and dropped that arm.
Okay.
So it could just be that there was a slight delay for some reason. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe it's just the way the footage is paused here. But it does, one thing to note is that when the jam is called off, it's signified by the referee blowing 4 whistles. And there are actually 3 sets of 4 whistles that you'll hear. So you'll hear tweet, 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 tweet. But the jam itself ends at the end of the first set. So the first tweet, 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 that moment is when the jam officially ends. So scoring can still be happening while that first set of whistles is going. So that could be what happened here too, is that the jammer referee was starting to blow those whistles, but that other jammer got through so quickly that they got some points in before the whistles were over.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a tough jam. I remember this one being upsetting in the game because I think there was some human error involved, perhaps from skaters and officials, where maybe it just wasn't seen or maybe it wasn't conveyed thoroughly. So that's part of why I picked this one out to show.
That's a great point. And it just goes to show, you know, all the officials are human too. So everyone out there is doing their best, but they miss things. We miss things too. We miss penalties sometimes, and sometimes we're a little slow on a call off. We looked away for a split second and missed something. So it does happen. We try not to let it happen, but we're all human.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All right, let's watch another jam.
Okay.
So we see the jammer refs holding up the number of points from that last pass and making sure the scorekeepers see it.
Mm-hmm.
And just briefly, the scorekeepers are not on screen right now, but they're like to the left on this screen, sitting there on, holding their clipboards and on a computer, helping make sure that people can see it on the screen. So that's what those people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So we notice here that there's a red line on the ground right where the jam timer is standing, and that's called the pivot line. So blockers must line up between the pivot line and the jammer line, which Brawn, if you pause it for a minute, just to give the video a second to
Thank you. Yeah,
catch up. So there's another red line kind of behind this group of skaters, and that's the jam line. So blockers must line up between those 2 lines at the start of a jam.
Okay. Is there any, I know sometimes I see skaters line up closer to the pivot line, like further away from the jammers, and sometimes I see them line up right in front of the jammers, like just a few inches away. Um, what are the reasons people might do that?
I think that it depends on a few factors. Sometimes your jammer that's on your team prefers a certain starting setup. So sometimes that jammer prefers that it's a scrum and everyone's really close to the jam line. And sometimes that jammer prefers space to get more speed or to have more pushing room. Conversely, your opposing jammer might like something and you don't want them to have that. So you might know that this specific jammer you're blocking against likes a lot of space, so you're not going to give them that space. Or maybe you know they like to hit right off the line and you don't want to give them that opportunity, so you line up closer to the pivot line. A little bit of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So if people who are blocking and they need to stay in front of the jammer line, if they accidentally are on the other side of the jammer line, like they roll backwards or something like that, what happens then?
Well, that's something that the officials are watching for at the start of the jam, or as the jam is just about to start. So, you know, as I said, they're required to be between those lines. They can't cross the line until after that jam starting whistle happens. So if a blocker were to step backwards over that jam line before the jam has started, they would get a false start warning. So the officials would say it was black 6. They're not in the right position. I'm just picking that number. They would say black 6, false start. And at that point, that player is required to yield. So they have to stop and yield position to anyone else, and then they can continue playing. And if they don't yield at the warning, then they can get a penalty for illegal positioning, but they get a warning first.
Mm-hmm. I know as a skater, sometimes when I get like a false start or I'm told that there's no pack, I'll go like this, just to kind of make it clear that I'm like, okay, I'm not engaging with anyone. So I know that's something fans might see, and sometimes they've wondered and asked me, why would skaters go like this?
What does that mean? Yeah, and they're not required to do that, but it's just a human nature thing. I'm not touching anything. I'm not doing anything. So
I swear I'm not bad.
But yeah, that's usually what that means, or they're trying to like let the refs know I'm being good.
Yeah. But when jammers do this, sometimes that means they might be getting ready to call it off. Like they'll often be doing this while looking at the bench and waiting for some direction from their bench to call it off. So that's another time people might have their hands up.
That's a good point. And that also ties in with, you were talking about sometimes it's possible for a ref to be a little bit slow calling off the jam in response to the jammer tapping their hips. We try not to be, but you will see sometimes the jammers do this not only to get their bench's attention, but also to make sure their jammer referee is watching and anticipating and is ready to call it off as soon as they're ready. So
yeah.
a good tool that jammers will use to get our attention too.
Cool. All right, let's see if this video will behave itself.
So we saw, if you see that jammer in black got out very quickly and was lead jammer almost immediately. And now jammer in red is pushing up at the front against that wall of blockers in black. And I believe she's going back and forth to try to get the wall split apart and moving more quickly so she can break through.
And then one of her teammates has come up to push here. So that person's probably trying to disrupt the wall or the tripod that's forming to hold them back.
And it looks like the black jammer must have just gotten assessed a penalty because they had come back around and they were about to start their scoring pass, and then they stopped and left the track.
Okay. So I see a skater back here, and then a bunch of skaters here in the front set up to play some defense. And this is then what we'd call a power jam, where it's a power jam for the red team is what we would typically say, because the black team's jammer's in the box for 30 seconds. So I think we were talking about this skater and what they might be experiencing. Could you tell us about that, Tess?
Yeah, so sometimes teams will use a strategy called getting a goat, and I don't really know why it's called that, but this skater in black in the back is called the goat, and the skaters in red, that wall is trying to maintain or keep that skater in the back. So they're gonna wall up or block that skater so that they have the pack. And what that can do is give the jammer in red less blockers in front to deal with. And it also can help if that jammer wants to push them out of play, there's less blockers to have to work against.
Yeah, okay.
And just if you're wondering, the pushing them out of play, what that means is there's, as you mentioned, a pack, and so the red team is now controlling where the pack is because they've got that goat. The goat is not an official term, by the way. It's just like I said, I don't know where that comes from either. Yeah. But the skaters are all required. You have to have a pack in order to be blocking or doing any active derby, and so that's the largest group of skaters. That's comprised of skaters from blockers, forgive me, jammers are not part of the pack. So it's the largest group of blockers at any given time that's comprised of at least one from each team, and that's on the track and that are in proximity to each other, which means they're within 10 feet of each other. If you are more than 20 feet ahead of where the pack is, then you're out of play and you cannot engage or block. So now you've got one black blocker trapped in the back. The other three can get pushed forward, but there's only so far they can go before they can't keep blocking that red jammer anymore. So that's, they would be out of play and no longer allowed to engage at that point.
Okay, so this player, Mod Behavior, is sort of stuck in the back, and right now just like letting it happen, not fighting really hard to get to the front, but does appear that they're being penned in like a little goat back there. And I think this is a cool jam because I think Mod makes the best of what could be a not so great situation in what happens next. Yeah. So let's play it. Oh, not that one.
Ooh.
Next pass.
That was a different cool thing. That was a really nice apex jump there.
Yeah. That was a nice apex jump. Okay, I got ahead of myself. So it's the next time the jammer comes around.
Fun fact about apex jumps, we talked about this in training camp a few weeks ago, but the skater in the air is not allowed to make contact with skaters on the ground. However, and Lizard, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the skaters on the ground are allowed to block that skater in the air. So it can be kind of risky because you're in the air and you're not allowed to touch anyone, but the skaters on the ground are allowed to block you. So sometimes you'll see these epic like hits to the ground that happen right on the inside of the track there, because the apex jump didn't go so well.
Yes, and yes, you're correct. And the reason that the jammer is not allowed to hit midair for safety reasons. So I mean, whether they're doing an apex jump or anything else, you're not allowed to leaping contact into a skater is not allowed for obvious reasons. You could really hurt somebody, but but they are allowed to attempt that jump, and the blockers are still allowed to block them. Yeah. The other thing that you might see sometimes when these apex jumps happen is the jammer fall down at the end of their jump. And one thing that people don't always realize is they don't have to stick the jump like in gymnastics. As long as the first thing that touches the ground is a part of a skate, then they can get those points. They are now have completed that pass. So if they touch the ground with a skate and then immediately fall, they can still get credit for those points. If they fall directly on their knees or some other part of their body, then it's not complete. But as long as a foot or a skate touches the ground first, it's a good jump.
I didn't realize that. I do sometimes see people like fall on their side if they got hit or something, and I had wondered that before, so thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
I've also seen people have a little bit of their skate out of bounds when they land, and then that would be not okay, right?
Correct. Good clarification. Yes, it has to be a part of their skate contacting inbounds. And then at that point, they're still considered upright. And then if they fall after that, that's fine.
So I backed it up so we could watch that little apex jump again. And I just wanted to point out while we're paused here that this skater in red is holding on to the back of their other skater, their teammate. And we talked in the last video about like where you can legally make contact with other skaters. But if they're from your own team, you can like grab onto them kind of however you want, essentially, as long as it's not like a multiplayer block where you're making an impenetrable bond that the other team can't get through. So I just wanted to point out that like, even though we talked about how you can't touch people and like hit people in the back or make contact with their back, this person's like holding on to their own skater for stability or for whatever like blocking advantage, and that's allowed. Okay, let's watch the apex jump.
Okay.
So Maud's still stuck back here.
Oh, this is that part you were talking about.
Yeah, it was really cool. So this skater in black, who was the goat in the back and separated from the rest of the pack, just hit this jammer out of bounds and is now running them backwards.
Which is really interesting because if you're a jammer in that situation and you see that one blocker on the outside, your blockers are trying to help you not have to deal with that person. So you might want to take the other line, but that's my opinion on that. So you don't have to do that, but it was
interesting. Yeah, good point.
You talked about that black blocker is now starting to run back to recycle that red jammer. And the reason for that is, I think you talked about in the first video last week, if you're hit out of bounds, you have to re-enter behind whoever hit you out and behind anyone else who was ahead of you when you were hit out. So, and if you don't, then that's a cut, just like cutting in line. Like you can't cut in front of people. You have to go back behind them. So if they move back, you have to go behind them. So that's a strategy that you'll see often employed.
Okay, and this jam is really a good one for that because there's lots of hitting the jammer out and running them back. And that just delays their advance around the track and delays them scoring points. So that's basically the essence of that strategy, and tires them out too. So if a jammer is constantly getting hit out, falling down somehow, even if they just fall on one knee and then they have to run backwards, that's pretty exhausting for a jammer. I imagine you would have experienced that, Tess.
Oh God, yes. So much.
So here that jammer is getting run back by Maud. And then the black pack got in the back.
Which is really smart because Maud, you know, one blocker against one jammer is not as effective as having your whole crew with you. So her friends and her teammates going back to help her is working out really well. They keep hitting her out and they're able to continue to hold her at the back of the pack.
How's the quality of this footage?
It is waning.
Okay. I suspected it might be.
There was an interesting thing happening there on the left side of the screen. So you had the black blockers in the back hitting out the red jammer and recycling that you were talking about. But in the meantime, the black jammer came back from the penalty box from serving their penalty, and they were pushing the red blockers forward in the front.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I noticed that some people started breaking off from the pack and standing by themselves. Is that what you were going to point out?
Yeah, there were a couple things. So at the, like I said, it was on the very edge of the screen. You can see the referee holding a hand up. He's giving an out of play warning. So he's letting them know that they're too far away from the pack. And so that's that 20-foot thing that we were talking about earlier. So what will happen is you'll see skaters break off from the group and try to create what they call a bridge to maintain, to stretch out the pack, to maintain a 10-foot distance, to make the pack longer. So then that pushes that 20 feet out of play boundary even further out and allows people to keep holding back the jammer for a little bit longer.
Great. And we'll see a couple people, I backed it up a few seconds, so we'll see a couple of those players act as a bridge. So they'll be like standing by themselves on the track in just a moment. So these two players are helping to form the bridge. So this skater here and this skater here and this skater here.
Right,
But mostly
and it was in
these
the
two.
interest of that red blocker to form a bridge. You notice that they were the first one to quickly get in the middle there because their team is trying to hold back the black blocker in the front. So strategically, red wants to keep that bridge intact.
Totally.
Oh, so that's interesting. If I am not mistaken, the jammer in black came out of the penalty box and was still the first jammer to legally exit the pack and earn lead jammer status. So even if you start in the penalty box as a jammer, if you're still the first one out of the pack legally, you can earn that lead jammer status.
As long as you started the jam in the box. So there is a clarification.
Oh, right,
there.
yes.
So if you started the jam on the track and got sent to the box, you've immediately lost your ability to ever become lead in that jam. But if you're in the box when a jam ends as a jammer and you start from the box, it's a clean slate and you can then earn lead, even if, you know, as long as the other jammer doesn't get it before you get back out there.
Yeah, thank you.
So usually we see people blocking like kind of static. Well, they're not moving forward really quickly around the track. And these folks all seem to be like moving around the track a little bit faster. Why would they be doing that?
Well, it looks like you've got both, neither of the jammers are being held in the pack right now. They're both out on the other side, sort of towards the middle left of your screen. You can see the two jammer referees following them. So so often when the jammers are racing, the pack will race forward because they're all trying to prevent the other team's jammer from catching up and scoring points.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like a race. Like if one of the jammers is in front, then that team is trying to slow the pack down to get points, but the other team knows that's happening, and so they're trying to prevent it. But, you know, at this point, usually a call-off happens because it's kind of a wash.
Yeah, I think in this case, we may not have a lead jammer right now. I don't see anyone pointing. So if, you know, like I said, lead can be lost. Somebody can get lead and then lose it if they commit a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
So there are times when you have a jam that has no lead. So I can't quite tell here, but it looks like that may be the situation here where neither of them has the ability to call it off, in which case, you know, this may be the only strategy that's left.
So you're playing like a game of keep away with your body basically some of the time. Like if you don't want to be passed for either your points or to establish a lead jammer, that's one strategy, right? Is to like skate away from people.
Skate away and try to just run down the clock and prevent the other team from scoring. Yeah.
Okay. So earlier, I paused it just so we could talk about the penalty box a little bit. Let me try to back it up just a little bit. Okay. So here you can kind of see the penalty box. It's a little blurry, but anything that you'd like to point out about that?
Yeah, so you may notice you can't see them all right now, but the penalty box consists of 6 seats. So there's one for each jammer, and then there are 2 seats for blockers from either team. And right now, based on where they're sitting, it looks like we've got a blocker and a pivot from the red team. The pivot is a blocker. They're just a blocker with special powers, kind of. But you've got 2 blockers from the red team that are seated in the box, serving penalties.
Okay, and then who are these people sitting right behind them?
Those are the penalty box manager and penalty box timers. So they're the ones that are responsible for keeping track of how long the players have been serving their penalties and for releasing them when they're done. So each penalty is 30 seconds, and that starts the moment that the person sits in the seat. So as soon as they contact the seat, that timer will start. They have stopwatches, and they'll start that 30 seconds. And then when they've served 20 seconds, then they tell them to stand. So if you see somebody standing in the box, that means they're almost done. And at 30 seconds, then they're done and they're allowed to go back to playing.
Cool. Tess, do you have any comments on the penalty box?
Oh gosh. It's it can be a nice place to reset. If you just committed a penalty, you can have a moment of mindfulness to yourself to collect and get back in the game, but it's a bummer. It's a bummer going to the penalty box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and meanwhile, so now you've got only 2 red blockers on the track trying to fight to keep the black blocker through, so they're definitely at a disadvantage right now.
Yeah. If one of the blockers is standing and another blocker in red were to commit a penalty, that blocker can sit in a chair where another blocker is standing. So like there can be many blockers in the penalty box, more than just the 2 seats.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point is a lot of people don't realize, they see the referees and the stripes, but we've been pointing out these different officials like the penalty box timers, and their job can be really tough because they've got 1 stopwatch or 2 maybe, and they're sitting there and they may have to be timing 3 different 30-second penalties and giving verbal cues to tell them when to stand, when to go, and they're also writing down and keeping a record of who's been in the box so that they know how many penalties they've served, because you foul out after 7 penalties. So there's a lot going on that fans may not realize. Just seeing these people in black with clipboards, they're doing a lot of work back there.
Mm-hmm. And I want to give a little shout out right here. You can see just immediately to the right of the black blocker on the right or outside part of the track, barium, you can see one of our medics, and we also have medics at our games who are trained medical personnel who can help address immediate injuries or needs on the track, like whether it's just an ice pack or if unfortunately someone breaks a bone or hits their head. So the medics are there and super valuable, all volunteers, and I just wanted to give them a quick shout out too.
That's a great point. They're kind of the unsung heroes, but we can't have Derby. That's one of the things that the head referee always looks for, is we have to make sure we have medics sitting there, eyes on the track for safety purposes at all times before we can start a game.
Totally. Okay, I'm gonna play it. I think this might be the last jam we're gonna watch because we have lots of great things to say about these, and I don't want this to go too long.
Mm-hmm. This is another one of those moments where someone gets hit out and drawn and pulled back, which is demoralizing as a jammer. But it looks like the jam is over.
Yeah, I think let's call it here for today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your lovely faces.
Yay.
Hi again. This has been really fun. Thank you so much. And we'll do it again sometime.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, have a great Sunday.
All
Yeah,
right.
you too.